watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and during the first week of September, new peace talks between the State of Israel and the Palestinian Authority began in Washington. There seemed to be some promise to these talks. Both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas each endorsed the notion of a two-state solution, which may be, as many see it, a breakthrough for both leaders. At the conclusion of the Washington talks, both leaders pledged that they would continue to meet every 2 weeks, and so it was. But on Sunday night, September 26th, Israel's 10-month moratorium on settlement construction within existing settlements on the West Bank expired. There was a great deal of conjecture over whether Israel would or would not extend that settlement construction freeze. On September 26th, Israel answered, no, it would not. And Israel ended its moratorium on settlement construction. As we tape today, Mahmoud Abbas has not yet said whether Israel's decision not to extend the settlement freeze will cause him to withdraw from the peace negotiations. Well, what do people think about Israel's decision? Was it the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do, the wise thing to do? For some analysis, I am very pleased to be joined now by two friends for whom I have the utmost respect and affection, who happen to approach the subject of Middle East peace from very different perspectives. First, I am pleased to welcome Mort Klein, President of the Zionist Organization of America. And joining Mort, I am also pleased to welcome Thane Rosenbaum, author, novelist, a law professor at Fordham Law School, and one who's written widely on issues relating to the State of Israel and human rights. Mort Klein, Thane Rosenbaum, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
It is wonderful to sit with the both of you again. Okay, so I want to ask the two of you what you think of Israel's decision to end its moratorium on settlement construction. Mort, what was your reaction to it?
Well, first of all, Netanyahu got this through his cabinet and to the people of Israel by pleading with them that this is a one-time temporary 10-month freeze on Jewish construction.
The original moratorium.
Correct. So the hope was that by doing this construction freeze, the Arabs would begin to implement some of their obligations under all of the agreements they signed over the last 17 years. But they fulfilled none of these obligations during this 10-month period. They have continued to promote hatred and violence against Jews in their schools, in their media, in their speeches. They continue to name schools, streets, and sports teams, shockingly, after killers of Jews. They have not outlawed terrorist groups, which is required in almost all the agreements they've signed. And they haven't even agreed to negotiate during this 10-month period until these last couple of weeks. So, of course, Netanyahu has done the right thing by ending this moratorium. So the Arabs should understand that they will no longer get one-sided concessions unless they start to change their behavior and their actions. And the worst thing, frankly, about this moratorium was it made it seem as if the problem is Jews living on 6% of the West Bank is why there's not peace, ignoring the fact that it's incitement, not arresting terrorists, not outlawing terrorist groups. Those are the reasons there's no peace. The Jews living in Judea and Samaria have virtually no impact on whether there's peace or not, and this gives this false impression that that's what the problem is. That's why it is important for the Palestinian Arabs to understand that Israel will continue to build until there's a final peace agreement. And as you had mentioned, they're building only within the prescribed boundaries that were set up in '93 for these communities. They're not building outside the boundaries. They're not creating any new settlements, meaning they're not taking up any more territory of the disputed West Bank, which ultimately there'll be some rational decision about.
So, Thane Rosenbaum, I ask you the same question. When you heard it, what was your reaction? Did they do the right thing?
Well, I'm not surprised that they chose not to extend the moratorium or the freeze. I assumed that for the same reason that Mort said, that Bibi had his own deal with the cabinet and he didn't want to renege on that. It was difficult for him to even have this one-time concession. Having said that, I disagree with the decision. I think that symbols are important, and in international affairs and in diplomacy, there is, in this instance, this is the one symbolic point for Palestinians that is their most deepest grievance, which is that if you're going to be negotiating with us in good faith over the West Bank, and if you really do in fact believe in a two-state solution, why are you building? Why are you building even in areas that you are presently occupy, even if it's not new areas, as Mort said? It symbolically has the significance that Israel can't be taken seriously. And it just strikes me that in such an instance, the way Mort describes it, well, let's just continue to make these distinctions. It's very important that there's a difference between Hamas and Fatah. And we're dealing with Abbas in the West Bank. And yes, it's true. I mean, I haven't attended any of these Palestinian schools, but yes, I'm sure that the curriculum still would be abhorrent to anyone that knows anything about Middle Eastern history. But this is a region that is free of terrorism. This is a region that is policing itself. This is not Gaza we're talking about. And I think that it's symbolically important for the United States and for Israel to send a message to Hamas that we're dealing with these guys. We're dealing with Fatah. These guys are real citizens of the world. These guys, after all, remember in 2000, Rabbi, Yasser Arafat walks away, and then we have an intifada, right? We have not rocks, we have explosions, we have bombs. At this point, Abbas he just said, I don't know what to do yet. I'm going to consult with the Arab League. I'm going to not be so hasty. My predecessor, Arafat, was a lunatic, and really reinforced everything that the Jewish world believed about the Palestinians, that there was no good faith, a guy would walk away from a 98% of the deal. Abbas hasn't even shown that yet. I think that that's something that we should all be embracing. And I think that we have an obligation, Israelis, American Jews, people of goodwill around the world, to support Abbas in what is clearly a much more moderate response to the crisis.
Well, let me just say, yes, there has been a dramatic reduction in terrorism. And I just came back from Israel, spoke to many of the generals from the top down who wanted to make it clear to me that it's not for lack of trying, that the reason there is a dramatic reduction in terrorism from Judea and Samaria into Israel is because IDF, Israel Defense Forces, are now in Judea and Samaria, searching out the terror cells, stopping terrorism before it begins. When there was the continual suicide bombings, we did not have our IDF soldiers there on a regular basis. And now we do. That's why terrorism has dropped dramatically, not because they've decided to stop terrorism. There are at least 10 attempts of terrorist attacks every month, I was told by generals in Israel when I was just over there.
Let me ask you specifically, when Thane says it's an important symbol, the construction freeze, was it in your mind, is the validity of the symbol at all important?
Look, there was no, Rabin refused to accept any freeze of any sort. They were negotiating when there was no freeze for 16 years. Why now suddenly is a freeze necessary? This was enormous pressure by Obama's people.
Thane used it as a symbol, just as a symbol.
No, that implies that the reason there's no peace is that Jews are living and building within their communities in Judea and Samaria, which is certainly untrue.
Well, my guess is you would not have supported any moratorium.
No, there should. I would support a dual moratorium. That neither.
There wasn't a dual moratorium.
Neither Arabs nor Jews should build.
You did not support the Netanyahu moratorium.
No, certainly not.
So
it's
you
a
thought,
unilateral
you thought
concession.
Netanyahu was wrong to even have a 10-month moratorium.
Look, I know Netanyahu, he did not want to have a freeze. He thought this was horrifically unfair.
Then why did Israel do it?
Enormous pressure from the Obama administration, implied threats from the Obama administration of allowing sanctions and other resolutions to possibly pass the UN, threats from Europe, and Netanyahu could not withstand these threats. He did not want this, especially he did not want to
What's changed that he
unilateral.
can withstand them now?
Because the deal was 10 months.
What? But the Netanyahu, the Obama administration
He has
wanted him to
he has
extend
the
it.
moral high ground. Now I said, look, it was 10 months. I agreed because the belief was that if I do this, that the incitement will drop dramatically, that they'll arrest terrorists, that they'll outlaw terrorist groups. None of those things happened. In fact, the very day negotiations began, 4 Israelis were murdered. And what did Abbas say about this, the so-called moderate? He said, these 4 Israelis should not have been killed because it's not in the Palestinian interest. He didn't say because it's an outrage to kill innocent Jews. He said it's not in the Palestinian interest and the timing is very bad. This is not the speech of a moderate. Not to mention only last month, during the moratorium, he said, I want the Arab states to go to war against Israel. I will support this war. I can't do it myself. In the last months, he's honored with full days of honoring Abu Daoud, the mastermind of the Munich massacre, the guy who was overseeing the murder of 11 athletes, as one of the great heroes. He named two children's camps
these
after
are Arab heroes.
Dalal.
These are Arab heroes.
Yeah, people who
These
murder
are Arab-
innocent Jews as a hero. What does it tell
These
you
are
about
Arab heroes.
Until that society is transformed, where people who have murdered innocent Jews are no longer heroes but are condemned, peace will not be possible. So the emphasis shouldn't be on whether Israel is building within the community or not. The emphasis should be, when are you going to change your textbooks and your speeches? When are you going to arrest anti-Israel terrorists? When are you going to outlaw Hamas and other terrorist groups? That should be the emphasis. That's the only way you're going to get to peace.
What do you say?
Well, it doesn't really matter whether Mort thinks it's a symbol or not. It's a symbol to the Palestinians. Of course it's not a symbol to Mort. It's important to the Palestinians, and therefore it should have been, as a gesture of goodwill, a sign that the Israelis are serious. Now, if you listen to everything Mort says, and he says that, well, we shouldn't even have this conversation. I mean, what Mort is ultimately saying is there's no point negotiating. First of all, he's raised the bar so high, and I thought by implication, Rabbi, that's what you're saying. They're Arab heroes, Mort. You're not going to stop them from having the people in their mind who have conducted righteous deeds for them. That doesn't mean that they can't imagine a different future. It just simply means that given the occupation, given their feelings, given about the mutual recriminations, the mutual grievances that Israelis and Palestinians have towards each other, that they worship heroes that you repudiate, that you condemn. And
vice versa.
And vice versa. In your world, Mort, there are people that you would uphold as the paragons and heroes to the Jewish people that they see as mass murderers. So the symbols don't matter. It doesn't matter what you think the symbol means. It's important to them if, in fact, Israel believes in a two-state solution. If Israel believes that the occupation is ultimately destructive to its own future and its own aspirations for ongoing continuity and nationhood, then we have to be at this table. In order to be at this table, we have to concede things that are very difficult, which is that, for one thing, the Palestinians aren't really good at going to the table. We know this. They're inept at diplomacy. They make many mistakes. We remember the Abba Eban line about, right, never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Yes, that's true. They would ride out the clock for 10 months and then all of a sudden say, all right, we didn't accomplish anything, give us another 10 months. Yes, but the things that Mort describes, right, the gestures that he needed to see, I think there's a lot of gestures there. I mean, we may not have fixed the school textbooks, may not have fixed what goes on in a mosque in the West Bank, and I honestly, he may have much better,
Well, I have to tell you both. We spoke today, and we're showing it this week. We spoke with Joel Lial, who is a counsel for information at the Israeli consulate in New York. He gives a litany of things the Palestinian Authority has done on the West Bank, and he makes a very significant distinction between the Palestinian life in Gaza and the Palestinian life on the West Bank. And to hear this member of the Israeli government extol life on the West Bank, in Ramallah, in Jenin, and the way in which the television has been changed and the rhetoric has been changed, I mean, Israel, the Israeli government may be fooling itself, but it is true that I was struck by the extent to which a member of the Israeli government wanted America to know through Shalom TV that there is a very big difference now between the Palestinian Authority of today and the one of 3 or 5 years ago. But I interrupted you.
No, it's all right. I was just going to say, picking up on that, Rabbi, that if you listen to Mort, there's really no difference between Gaza and the West Bank. And here's an Israeli consulate official who's telling us it's not just demonstrably better. I can tell you internally it's better. And Mort now tells us that he's communicated with some generals that say terrorism would be running rampant. Clearly, that's not the story we're hearing. The story that we've heard is that the Palestinians have managed to provide the necessary security arrangements that have satisfied the Israelis to some extent. Surely not in the most ideal sense, but if we grant that Netanyahu has his own politics within his cabinet, can we at least accept that Abbas has the same? That he may say things publicly that's for his street, but that he is really moving towards some negotiated settlement, some gesture, and the fact that he hasn't walked away from the table and incited violence is one expression, one manifestation of that. Take people at what they say, but also measure their deeds. It does appear as if there's some earnest interest in negotiating with Israelis, and I think it's very dangerous to stigmatize and blackball Abbas to make him appear as if he's a wholly owned subsidiary of Hamas.
Thane alone, who's the deputy foreign minister, has spoken to us at the Conference of Presidents of the Jewish organizations.
We showed that, by the way, on Shalom TV.
Has spoken to me personally, I know him for many years, saying it is so disheartening that there's been virtually no change in their promotion of hatred and violence against Jews in their textbooks, in their TV, radio. So the message that the Deputy Foreign Minister gives is totally different than the message that you are telling us that this...
It's not my message.
No, message you're telling us.
I'm just telling you what people are going to see this week on Shalom TV.
The communications officer for the Israeli consulate.
That's correct.
The deputy foreign minister is in charge of incitement and trying to do something about it. They now have a metric which is way deep into the minus numbers of how many statements and films and speeches are made promoting hatred and violence. So this is simply inaccurate. When the deputy foreign minister is in charge of this is saying that none of these things have happened. This very week on PA TV, a woman dancer is holding a rifle and singing, "My weapon has emerged. There's no force in the world that can remove the weapon from my hand. He who offers his blood doesn't care if his blood flows upon the ground," promoting violence. Several weeks ago, an imam repeated dozens of times on PA TV, stated, "We must go and kill the Jews as best we can," promoting murder. So I don't know what you're talking about. And when Abbas says, "We want the Arab world to go to war," you're saying that, that's what he has to say to his hardliners? No. He has to create a situation where he's creating an environment that peace should be pursued, not let's go to war, not allowing this promotion of hatred and violence. No. I don't accept him saying it's a good thing to murder Jews, that he allows this on PA TV and in speeches. Not at all. This is what you had in the 30s in Germany. He should be saying, stop killing innocent Jews. It is wrong. The Jews have a right to their state within the 67 border. Instead, what has Salam Fayyad, the number 2 man, has done? Let me finish, please. When he asked for Danny Ayalon to sign a statement supporting 2 states, Ayalon said, "I want a statement that says 2 states for 2 peoples," and Fayyad stormed out screaming and yelling. He will not accept Israel as a Jewish state even now, because their goal is Israel's destruction. That's why there's not a single map in the Palestinian Authority showing Israel even within the 67 border. And whether there's 300,000 Jews who live in Judea and Samaria now, or a year from now there would be 310,000, would not make a bit of difference for any possible peace agreement that would occur.
I don't think anybody would argue with that. The argument is not that this is a substantive issue. That's why Thane's use of the word symbol was so important to me. And I want to ask you a question about your general approach then to the entire peace process, but I'll let you answer anything you want to say first.
I just want to respond to Mort and say, Mort, surely there are Israelis who publicly and privately say some very repugnant things
Nothing,
about
no,
Arab.
no,
Not
no,
Israeli
no, no,
leaders.
no, no.
That is unfair
No,
of you.
no, 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 you
Not
don't mean that. You don't mean
not
that.
political officials.
Israelis do not speak
What
the way
political officials have
Palestinians
called for the
speak.
murder of
There
Arabs?
are been people throughout Israel. This is a democratic
political official.
society.
Name it.
I'm
Name-
not talking about Netanyahu, but you're making Abbas responsible to tell this woman with her gun that she can't speak and say
No,
what she's...
what he said was it
PA
was on
controls.
television.
PA controls
And
this
you
TV.
don't see anything similar to that on Israeli television. And boy, I'm in between here, but I think it's very important never to try to make a moral equivalency.
It's not a moral equivalence.
There's
it's simply
nothing
a
that goes
reality
on
of
in the Jewish
It's a
world.
reality of our world that if you're pushing the Palestinians to be exactly what we see in Israel today, we will fail.
That is
if
correct.
If
That
we were
is correct.
insisting, because that's what Mort is insisting. Look at us. Look how exemplary we are. Until Abbas can do the same thing.
But wait.
Here's a man with much less power than Netanyahu, in many, many ways, a completely unevolved society. I mean, they're working off of a non-state apparatus. And the standard that Mort holds him to, which is saying, look, I'm not a great Abbas fan either. I just am trying to recognize something to negotiate with.
Okay, and
somebody
I-
who,
all right,
somebody
I wanna
who's
make
taking
sure-
the
I
necessary
wanna
step.
make sure we
And
understand your
The more I hear
position.
Mort, the more I think that everything he's saying is a subtext to it's pointless.
Yes, and I want to get to that in one moment. But first, I want to make sure you and I do see somewhat eye to eye here. I think that if possible, the Palestinian community should shut down the kind of virulent language and not only rhetoric but also actions.
Clearly.
Okay, so I have no objection to more showing us all the things they do. The question for me is the question you just raised. For Mort, does that mean that there was no reason for Netanyahu to go to Washington at the beginning of September, to sit with Abbas, and to then take part in a peace process that Netanyahu, as we tape today, went on record and saying within a year there will be a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians? I believe that your support of the end of the moratorium is a function not of the moratorium, but a function of your belief that the peace process is a sham, that there's not a possibility in the world that given who Abbas and the Palestinian Authority is now, including their lack of power, that there's no way in which there's going to be a peace. And your real perspective is this entire thing, I'll use the word again, is a sham. Am I wrong?
As long, what Israel and America should be doing is saying, we will not continue funding the Palestinian Authority to the tune of $1.3 billion.
I want you to answer my question. I want you to answer
As
my
long-
question. Is it a sham?
As long as the Palestinian Authority, yes, continues to not arrest a single anti-Israel terrorist, not outlaw terrorists who murder Jews, innocent Jews, and promoting hatred and violence in every aspect of their culture, peace is not possible.
So Netanyahu should not be sitting now with Abbas.
No, that I did not say. You said that.
I'm asking you, is that what you said?
He should be sitting with them and saying we cannot consider another single concession after Israel's given away all of Gaza, half of the West Bank, and Israel's gotten virtually nothing from the Palestinian Arabs. Netanyahu and America should say to Abbas, until you change these TV shows that you control, no matter how weak you are, you control them. You control the newspapers and TV.
Until then what? Until then what?
We will not require or demand or urge Israel to make a single concession to move forward in any way, shape, or form. You have to start transforming that society.
You do want Netanyahu and Abbas to sit together?
Yes.
Even though Abbas has not done any things that you think are necessary?
That's right. I want them to sit together so Netanyahu and hopefully America will urge Abbas to start transforming the society. For God's sakes, Rabbi, it is Thane, it is 17 years since Oslo began. 17 years. And everything is virtually the same in terms of incitement, not arresting terrorists, not outlawing terrorist groups. They should be sitting and saying, start doing what you promised 17 years ago.
Is that a peace talk?
Yes, of course, in peace talk, because if they would do that, you would start transforming that culture into one that can accept Jews having sovereign rights and you don't kill innocent Israelis.
So they should not be talking about how do we implement the two-state solution.
I mean, the Palestinian state solution. Israel's already a state. I never
You
understood
know
this
exactly
phrase.
what I mean.
No, to set up, to move forward, to give more land away and set up a state now. Under these circumstances, you'll be setting up another terrorist state that even Dan Meridor and Tzipi Livni told me Hamas will end up controlling it and Iran will be in there controlling it.
Okay, so at the moment, you don't support the notion of what is commonly called the two-state solution.
I do not support the establishment of a Palestinian state while they're promoting hatred and violence, not arresting anti-Israel terrorists, and not outlawing terrorist groups. Correct.
How come Netanyahu doesn't understand it like you do?
I know Netanyahu very well. I've talked to him dozens and dozens of times. Netanyahu understands all these things very well. He is petrified that if he doesn't seem forthcoming, that the world will blame Israel, as they always blame Israel, for stopping the possibility of peace. Just like when we went into Gaza to finally end the rockets going into Israel, the whole world blamed Israel.
Is Netanyahu right?
He's right that the world will blame Israel. And I think even if Israel acts in an extremely forthcoming way, in a very gracious and generous way, the world will still blame Israel. Netanyahu is hoping if Israel says, please negotiate, we're ready to give you a state, we're ready to give you sovereignty, we're ready to do whatever we can do to have you have a sovereign Palestinian state, that when it breaks down, well, tragically, it looks like it will, Israel won't be blamed. Now, if the Palestinian Authority would accept this and would change that society as they promised in Oslo and the Hebron Agreements and Oslo II and the roadmap, if that would happen, people like me wouldn't be listened to if we didn't want to make concessions. Because then it looked like there's been a transformation. They really accept Israel as a sovereign Jewish state. But we haven't even gotten close to that. I want to see Israel on the maps of the Palestinian Authority within the 67 border. Even saying they want all of Judea and Samaria and half of Jerusalem. I want to hear them condemning the murder of innocent Jews. I assume Thane doesn't want to have him, Abbas, speaking and saying, we support war against Israel by the Arab states. That's speaking to his hardliners. That's creating an atmosphere where peace is impossible. I believe peace is possible, but only if the Palestinian Authority understands they'll not get another inch of land or not another concession or no more money to America until they begin to fulfill their obligations under the 17-year-old Oslo Accords.
Do you want Netanyahu to say that
Yes,
publicly?
and I've told him that directly. I want him to say that publicly. He is afraid to say that because he thinks if he says it, people will start accusing him of saying that in order to make it more difficult to continue negotiations because the Arabs have not done anything in 17 years.
Okay, you've heard a lot. What's your response?
If you were listening to the last 6 minutes of this, would you think this is a negotiating partner? Would you actually listen to Mort and say, this is the person I want to sit with? This is the person that really genuinely,
well, he's been honest enough to say he would not sit right
now.
now.
I understand. I'm just saying that when you said, is this what Netanyahu would say? You're asking him, should he take this public position and create these levels of conditions? First of all, Mort's done this for our entire segment. He is conflating Gaza with the West Bank. When he says, have done nothing, nothing? The Palestinians, right now, it's been for a number of years now, there is peace in the West Bank. I'm going to say that again. There is peace. There's not peace in Gaza. Israel doesn't have to rush back into the West Bank to disarm
They're there.
Fatah.
They're there now.
But more.
The IDF is there in the West Bank.
But one of the things, and I hope you will show this segment from this consulate.
Yes, we're showing it.
The Israelis must be experiencing some level of satisfaction. It's everything that we've read. We may not have the inside information that Mort has, but everything we've read is that the security apparatus within the West Bank is intact, that the Israelis have, in fact, observed serious changes. What Mort says, and that's why I'm saying, is this a negotiation position? Because it doesn't sound like it. Here is single thing we need to see first. Every single thing. But here is something so symbolically profound for the Palestinians. If we're going to be retaking the West Bank and the occupation will be ended and this will be part of the two-state solution, why are you building? What message are you sending? Now, if you listen to Mort, it would sound, here's what I would say, the parallel argument. The Fatah starts bringing in weapons that we would not have expected them to bring in. They say they have no intention to use it, but for security reasons, to take care of things. The Israelis would take the similar position. What message are you sending as a negotiating partner that we see you arming yourself at the very time that we're not building? we've made this concession because we recognize symbolically settlements are the cornerstones of your grievance. But for us, security is the cornerstone of our grievance. And Israel does have security in the West Bank, and it does not appear as if that rockets and tunnels are being smuggled inside of the West Bank. And that would be the red-hot button for Israelis. This would be the example of the bad faith on the side of Fatah. And we haven't seen that. If anything, other than what Mort is telling us, we've seen sober, calm, everything that we didn't see with Arafat, right? Disciplined. All right, they didn't move quickly on 10 months, but I was impressed that Abbas didn't run away saying, you see, you look at this, it's over, we're never coming back. And I think that this is meaningful, and if you're serious about negotiating, this has to be seen as a gesture on the part of the Palestinians saying, look, you've seen the way we used to roll, right? You used to see the way we used to do it. Whenever we got pissed off, you saw what we did. We're pissed off now, we're not throwing rocks, we're not bombing anyone. There's no suicide bomb in Tel Aviv. We're simply saying we have to think about this because this is important to us.
You are serious about negotiating at this point in time.
I can't believe that we've been all wasting our time.
And that's really as I listen to the two of you, it becomes clear to me that the prior assumptions you bring to the discussion, which lead you in different directions, are predicated on whether each of you would have said the negotiations which began in September have validity in and of themselves.
Well, yeah, what's the alternative? It's untenable. I mean, the question to ask Mort is, where do you see Israel in 10 years, 5 years? You think that this is going to just continue? The country will not survive. It will implode. It will be torn apart on many different fronts.
Yes, but you are not suggesting Israel should commit suicide.
Of course not.
Okay, and Mort is saying...
And they're not negotiating with Hamas, by the way.
The problem that I hear Mort saying is, there has been for him, there are too many symbols of a regime which is still really looking for the destruction of Israel. That's in essence what you're saying.
I believe the reason there hasn't been an agreement, which there could have been, is because Rabin and Netanyahu and Barak and Sharon did not make a public issue out of the continuing pro-terror actions by the Palestinian Authority and saying, we cannot consider any more concessions until these things stop, and make it clear to the world, you got to change the incitement, you got to arrest terrorists, I want to see them in prison and keep them there, you got to outlaw Hamas and other terrorist groups. That's what Oslo required, and if you don't do what you promised 17 years ago, what you promised 5 years ago at that point in time, we cannot consider making any land concessions to you. Had they done that, we could be a lot further. It's 17 years. Israel's given all of Gaza, half of Judea and Samaria.
No one would disagree with you.
And things are awful.
Okay, now
so I guess he would have been against...
Awful is what people would disagree with you about.
He would have...
Your conclusion that you draw is the one that I think Netanyahu, your friend, would disagree with.
Okay, I have one last question for you as we run out of time. What do you see happening now? And again, it's not that you're a prophet, neither of you are prophets.
God knows.
But I still...
I agree with Thane
I want just an instinct, Mort and Thane. What is your sense now? So Israel says, no, we're not going to extend the moratorium. Abbas, as we tape, has not yet said whether he'll withdraw or not. My sense is he will not, but we'll see. But in general, as you look at the peace process, just give me 30 seconds on where you think this is going and whether we're really about to come to an end or whether you see something positive in the near future.
No, I think that Abbas will continue negotiating under tremendous pressure, frankly, from the administration and even Europe. And I think that Netanyahu and Israel will not be able to make any substantive concessions of land or anything else till Abbas honors his 17-year-old commitments and begins to transform a society and arrest terrorism. And if that doesn't happen, then I don't think there's any possibility moving forward. And I am very pessimistic that Abbas and Fayyad are interested in doing this, or they would firstly be accepting Israel as a sovereign Jewish state. The fact that they don't makes it very clear that they still want millions of refugees to come into Israel to destroy Israel as a Jewish state, and that their ultimate goal is Israel's destruction. That's why they won't accept Israel as a Jewish state.
So you really feel these peace talks are going to collapse?
I hope I'm wrong, but yes, I believe there's no hope for any real peace until those fundamental issues that we've been addressing, that I've been addressing, are fulfilled 17 years after they were promised to be fulfilled.
Okay, your instinct.
If the Arab League, at the end of this week, somehow has Abbas going back to the table I think that would be an extraordinary gesture on a part of the Arab world. And I think it would be the kind of symbolic gesture that Netanyahu would have to take seriously. Mort might not, but I think people around the world were going to say, all right, we've seen the old Palestinian model. You know, we've seen your grandmother's version of the Palestinian world with Arafat. We know what can happen when people walk away from the table. Here, Abbas went back. He actually coordinated with other Arab nations and said, look, let's give this another chance. And
So what's your instinct? What's
my
gonna
instinct
happen?
is if he comes back to the table, at least this will continue to be extended. The conversation will be extended. Whether Israel will then recognize some obligation to also provide another concession in response to that, I can't speak to that because, you see, I recognize that Netanyahu has the same political problem with his cabinet as Abbas does in an area that he has very loose control over, knowing that he has cousins in Gaza who appeal to the very same constituency that he's trying to attract. I think we're completely, I mean, the bar that Mort raises for Abbas seems unwinnable.
The bar is simply to honor a 17-year-old agreement called Oslo. That's the bar. Abbas made a speech last week saying no Jews will be permitted in the Palestinian Authority territories. Now, if he really wants peace with the Jewish state, why would he say, I don't want Jews here?
What's your answer?
Keep negotiating. These are things that are up the subject for negotiation. In the same way that Netanyahu said, let's just keep building here while we're here. You know, if in fact we're taking it down eventually, right? If these areas of the West Bank won't be under Israeli control, we're wasting construction material. There should be no bulldozers there. And the reason is, well, these are all subjects to negotiation under border considerations and territory considerations. And Abbas could be taking the exact same position. There are things that I say that I might not ultimately have to.
Bottom line, are you optimistic?
No.
Oh,
I want to be. I want to
I
be.
got two pessimists here.
I want to be. I'm always prepared to have them talk.
But you don't understand. There, the two of you agree. You're both pessimistic.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
of the actions. But I would ask Thane, now, why can't 300,000 Jews live among 1.5 million Arabs in the territories when 1.25 million Arabs can
What
live
are you
among
asking
Jews?
him for? He wouldn't say no.
Right. I'm
Well,
happy.
no,
He
so
wouldn't say
why-
no.
I'm happy.
He would be happy to have that
But
negotiated.
clearly, Mort, that's going to be negotiated. And clearly Israel wouldn't actually construct a deal that wouldn't account for that. So the point is the fact that they're not saying that now seems as intractable to me as the ongoing persistence and pervasiveness of the settlements.
I could go on and on and on with the two of you. I love you off camera. I adore you on camera. Mort Klein, Thane Rosenbaum, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I thank the two
Thank
of you so much. It's wonderful having you. And you're two sensitive and bright people who, again, see this differently, but at the same time, our passion is shared, and I appreciate you very, very much.
Well, thank you, Rabbi.
And those were the thoughts of Mort Klein and Thane Rosenbaum. We hope you enjoyed hearing their perspective on the current peace process and Israel's decision to end its settlement construction freeze. So what are your thoughts? Did Israel do the right thing or the wrong thing by deciding not to extend the settlement construction moratorium? And how optimistic are you about the peace process in general? Should it be given a chance, or is it really meaningless? Please share your thoughts with us by writing me this week, by email, or by mail. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.